Benvenuto al Continentale di Roma. Come posso essere d'aiuto?
I'd like to review some movies.
Jonathan.
Not used to hearing my real name in these intro things.
I fail to recall the last time you were in Rome.
It's been a while.
And here I'd heard you had retired.
Just took a few months off. My wife and I are expecting our first child soon, so things have been busy.
Then humor me with but one question. Sei qui per il Santo Padre?
No.
All right, then. One of our finest rooms.
Thanks. This will be a real help. And this is Movie Night. It's been about 3 months since our last episode, and it is late October now, so we're just going to go ahead and call this Season 9. Hello and welcome back to Movie Night. Inconsistently uploaded, but never half-assed. I'm your host, Jonathan Paula. Although I haven't uploaded as many videos this year, I have still been watching and reviewing plenty of new releases, and tonight I want to take a look back at some of my favorite films from 2017 that I haven't already set aside for future episodes in November or featured in earlier videos. So Kong, War of the Apes, and any superhero movie won't be included. In release order, we'll start with John Wick Chapter 2. Well, that was f***ing awesome. This neo-noir action thriller from director Chad Stahelski quadrupled its $40 million budget after its February 2017 release. Following the chaotic and deadly events of Chapter 1, Keanu Reeves, Wick, must return to the life of an internationally hunted hitman to repay a special debt. The best part about the original wasn't the brilliantly filmed and choreographed hand-to-hand action sequences, but rather the inventive and detailed criminal universe created by writer Derek Kolstad. Which is why I was so elated that Chapter 2 doubled down on its exploration, showing us more scenes and faces in this fascinating network of honorable modern-day assassins. The whole "you must honor the rules of our society" plot devices also managed to make believable sense of a crazy situation that no sane person would willingly embark on, least of all a man as careful as intelligent as our title character. For his efforts, the ageless Keanu proves once again to be more than capable of handling the ferocious gunplay and physical stunt work. Say what you might about his ability to emote, but he can handle a firearm better than anyone in Hollywood, which comes in handy since the R-rated adventure boasts a body count north of 120.
You working?
Yeah. You?
Yeah. Good night.
Afraid so.
I'm sorry to hear that.
A catacombs escape that closes out Act 1 is particularly incredible, especially a bit where Wick holds a baddie at bay with the muzzle of his shotgun barrel while he reloads to finish the job. Badass. Even at 122 minutes, John Wick moves with relentless ease, especially the final 45 minutes, which don't seem to let up for a moment. The talented supporting cast deliver their less than subtle dialogue with Shakespearean authority, whether Ian McShane is lecturing the villain on his mistakes, "You stabbed the devil in the back," or Lawrence Fishburne waxing poetic about his former The Matrix co-star. There's a certain gravitas behind these relatively minor characters. Of particular note is Claudia Guarini as Wick's initial target. In her only scene, she exhibits perennial class and beauty far beyond what's necessary for a part like this. Let's just say I was impressed. And let's not forget Peter "Sassy Trump" Serafinowicz, who was particularly amusing as the purveyor of a wine-tasting themed gun dispensary. But least we forget how absolutely gorgeous the cinematography here is. Dark corridors and deep shadows are punctured by bright and vibrant beams of color and light. The steady framework keeps the action easy to follow while showing off the sets and scenery. Part 1 took place in empty warehouses and mansions, whereas this sequel has our hero leaping through Roman ruins and shooting up a mirror-filled museum exhibit. The upgraded locations all look stunning. The auditory onslaught isn't too bad either, with careful mixing of the loud gunfire, breathless grunts, and heavy punches. I expect to see a few technical nominations for this flick come awards season. Building off the concepts, techniques, and payoffs established by its predecessor, John Wick Chapter 2 is a phenomenal action film, one of this decade's best, and an astonishingly fun experience. I thought it was amazing. Now, a quick word about tonight's sponsor. Looking this good isn't easy, but thanks to this stylish tailor-made watch from Yode, I can at least look slightly nicer. A fantastic fashion accessory for this fall season, I picked up the Dover design in dark sandalwood and zebra and had it engraved with one of my favorite movie quotes. Every Yode product is an effortless addition to your wardrobe. They look sharp, sophisticated, and elegant, and are competitively priced. But you won't have to worry about money since Movie Night and Yode have partnered to give away $180, complete with a free sizing and free shipping. All you have to do is click the first link in the description below and fill out a short form, and you're entered to win. And in 2 weeks, one lucky winner will be selected at random to pick out whichever watch they'd like to own. There's dozens to choose from, each with several variations and different types of wood, available for men and women. But if you prefer not to leave things to chance, during the duration of this contest you can also use the coupon code JOGWHEEL to receive $25 off your order. And if watches aren't quite your thing, you might as well enter anyway, as they make an excellent gift, especially with the holidays quickly approaching. These promotions help make the show possible, so thanks as always for your time and attention. Let's get back to the reviews with my thoughts on Get Out. This fantastically inventive and provocative psychological horror film from first-time director Jordan Peele was released nationwide on February 24, 2017. The very modestly budget $4.5 million production broke an impressive $250 million in ticket sales. When a young African-American man visits his Caucasian girlfriend's mysterious family estate, not everything is as picture-perfect as it seems. Inherently an allegory for today's more suppressed form of racism, Get Out delivers this important social message through the lens of a purely haunting and downright frightening narrative. Daniel Kaluuya is outstanding at anchoring the bizarre R-rated story. The gorgeous Allison Williams pulls off duality within her character with surprising ease, while the always versatile Bradley Whitford is suspiciously disarming as a wholesome father figure.
Come here, come here.
What the f***? You left me out there.
Look at this. She unplugged my phone.
Who?
Georgina. I came here to talk to Rod and I got no juice.
So you think she did that because...
Maybe she doesn't like the fact that I'm with you.
Really?
It's a thing.
So you are so sexy that people are just unplugging your phone?
Now, there was a very real part of me that wanted this story to conclude without any major twist. It would have been way funnier, but less scary, if all the terrifying circumstances and perceived racism was just in Kaluuya's paranoid head. Thankfully, the script, also penned by Peele, takes the movie to unimagined depths that are best explored unspoiled. I'll only say that this film's most powerful accomplishment arrives moments before the credits roll, when it appears everything our hero struggled for was for naught. Through expert direction, a subtle setup earlier, and the underlying racism our society tries to ignore every day, this singular moment lands with pure chills. For the briefest of moments, all of white America was able to understand, or at least relate to, the fear our African American brothers experience every day. Although it was a little heavy-handed with the Microsoft product placement, this 104-minute thriller delivered a wholly unique and captivating experience. And even though it's the first major release of the year that I saw, it was instantly leaps ahead of anything I saw in 2016. Evocative commentary and visceral scares from a visionary talent make Get Out a truly amazing film. Next up, Beauty and the Beast. Just as magical. Rather than a fresh adaptation of the centuries-old French fairy tale, this 129-minute musical fantasy is a direct, live-action remake of Disney's Oscar-winning animated version from 1991. The PG-rated film was a monster success, grossing over $1.2 billion, almost 3 times the original's gross, to become the highest-grossing film of the year after its March 2017 release. Not bad for a $160 million update, huh? When a young woman travels outside her provincial French town to rescue her father, she falls in love with a beastly-looking prince who has been imprisoned in a large castle by an old curse. Emma Watson and Dan Stevens star as the titular characters, while Luke Evans, Kevin Kline, Josh Gad, Ewan McGregor, Stanley Tucci, Ian McKellen, and Emma Thompson are featured in the many interesting and eclectic supporting roles. Not that there was any doubt, but Watson positively excels in the lead role, carrying the reputation of the iconic songs with poise, perseverance, and stunning beauty. Although I can't say the same for Stevens, but he does do enough to disappear into the CGI-assisted role.
Look, there she goes, that girl is strange, no question.
Dazed and distracted, can't you tell?
Give a part of any crowd, cause her head's up on some cloud. No denying she's a funny girl, that belle.
Bonjour, good day, how is your family?
Bonjour, good day, how is your wife? I need 6 eggs, that's too expensive.
There must be more than this provincial life.
Evans, meanwhile, nails the smarmy Gaston part with plenty of musical boasting, while Gad makes jokes as the plucky and controversially gay sidekick. Under sterling direction from Bill Condon, this updated version delivers the wonders, sights, and sounds just as before. Everything from the costumes, visual effects, and the characters themselves are gorgeous. The musical numbers, including a few new tunes, are catchy, lively, and irresistibly fun. It's hard not to get goosebumps when Thompson begins belting out the Oscar-winning titular song. Kids, women, and literally anyone who enjoyed the animated version will adore this fun and flashy retelling. Obviously, nothing here is particularly original, but this is one tale that has withstood the test of time. An enjoyable and warm-hearted trip down nostalgia lane for the entire family, Beauty and the Beast is an awesome remake. Fourth up, a bonus review for King Arthur Legend of the Sword, most of which I actually filmed back when it came out in May. Surprisingly entertaining. Apropos of nothing, I recently watched the 90s family film A Kid in King Arthur's Court, and I remember thinking to myself, Hollywood is long overdue for a good modern take on the swords and shield genre. And unbeknownst to me at the time, director Guy Ritchie was already well on his way to finishing this 126-minute adventure. Now, I get it, the last thing we need is yet another remake, but the mythology and story surrounding the Knights of the Round Table are so rich and diverse, it'd be a shame if some poorly received Keira Knightley film from 10 years ago was the last time we saw a proper theatrical adaptation of this era. And while I'll be the first to admit this latest version is hardly historically accurate, the cold open features 500-foot elephants destroying giant bridges like they're made out of Lego bricks, it was a damn enjoyable time. Premiering on the heels of blockbuster juggernaut Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 on May 12, 2017, this $175 million production was doomed to box office failure. Which is unfortunate, as the inventive retelling really didn't deserve such a fate. I guess Warner Brothers' plan to make 5 more of them was just wishful thinking. Charlie Hunnam portrays the title character in this PG-13 rated origin story, which has Arthur rising from orphaned obscurity in medieval England to pull sword from stone and challenge the evil king for his true legacy. The talented Sons of Anarchy star bulked up to play the man who would be king, and does a wonderful job mixing incredulous emotions with cheeky confidence. A die-hard childhood fan of 1981's Excalibur, Hunnam's reverence and respect for this property is obvious. He goes all out in every scene. If everything else broke down, the movie would still be worth watching for his character alone.
I haven't had a fight for years. And I'll talk. I'm happy to talk. But there is no way that I am fighting.
An early monologue to a doubtful enemy has him describing his improbable skill set, while parallel flashbacks amusingly show the truth. He tackles, swings, punches, and jumps like a veteran action hero, apparently modeling his style off UFC fighter Conor McGregor. And thanks to some absolutely stellar sound design, every sword fight, fist fight, and street fight are filled with heavy and violent hits. Ritchie's kinetic, motion tracking traits lend themselves well to the faster sequences, even if these modern cinematic techniques feel almost anachronistic, if that makes any sense. The editing is equally excellent, blending Guy's trademark super-fast, non-linear smash-cut style to create a uniquely familiar atmosphere, or as he described it, Lord of the Rings meets Snatch. The results are occasionally funny and always entertaining. Action movies are really only as good as the villain, and thanks to Jude Law's suitably detestable performance, King Arthur is in good shape. With his hairline receding, he seems to be gravitating towards older bad guy roles these days, but we're all a beneficiary of this career transition. His uncaring demeanor and menacing scowl are a perfect fit for the evil King Vortigern. Describing his vile behavior, Arthur tells him, "You make sense of the devil." Elsewhere, Djimon Hounsou, Aidan Gillen, and Eric Bana do fine work in smaller supporting roles, while love interest/side piece Astrid Burgess-Fresbey feels like a wasted afterthought. The one thing that really struck out to me though is Daniel Pemberton's music, which can best be described as orchestral grunge, keeping the mood intense and the pace driving. It's definitely a score I'll be picking up on CD when it's released. For better or worse, this is your quintessential period piece popcorn flick. All the familiar good vs. evil action movie tropes are here, but they're at least executed in fresh ways. And despite one perfectly dropped F-bomb, it's also a safe time for dates and families. If you adjust your expectations accordingly, King Arthur Legend of the Sword is a fun, whiz-bang adventure with time-tested characters. I thought it was great. Next up, Dunkirk. Nolan has done it again. Produced on a comparatively small budget of $100 million, this PG-13 rated war epic is the 10th feature from acclaimed director Christopher Nolan, which scored over $500 million in ticket sales just a couple months after its July 21, 2017 release. Sharing the inspiring true story of the Allies' rescue from Dunkirk Beach during the Second World War, this 106-minute drama unfolds without much dialogue or even conventional protagonists. Instead, the extremely lean script illustrates through action and visuals alone how harrowing and dangerous the battlefields in the land, sea, and air really were. Fitting into one of those three location categories, the ensemble cast features understated and powerful performances from a slew of familiar faces, including Fionn Whitehead, Harry Styles, James D'Arcy, Kenneth Branagh, Cillian Murphy, Mark Rylance, and Tom Hardy. Nolan's unique approach to their lack of development means each character is somewhat generic and interchangeable though. The survival scenarios they constantly find themselves in are so terrifying and realistic, we can't help but picture ourselves in their shoes. And since we learn so little about these characters, most aren't even given names, this emotional transference is vital to the success of the narrative. Those expecting traditional character arcs or introspective monologues need to look elsewhere. Saving Private Ryan, this is not. Indeed, rather than personalizing a giant battle by showing a single soldier's experience, Nolan goes in the opposite direction, employing a giant ensemble with thousands of extras, with no single person receiving the lion's share of screen time. Dunkirk is an immersive experience that's bolstered by an extremely loud and visceral sound mix, unforgiving with its dynamic range. When gunfire pierces the silence, it is as startling as it is uncomfortable. Or the terrifying sound of the Jericho trumpet sirens from German fighter planes as they dive for another attack run. Meanwhile, Hans Zimmer doles out an aggressively intense score that builds and builds to seemingly never-ending crescendos, constantly keeping the tension on edge, often drowning out all other sounds. The music is an overbearing accompaniment to the stressful action unfolding on screen, and one of the more memorable soundtracks in Zimmer's catalog, even if it is a bit distracting at times. Only the third movie of the decade to be primarily shot and filmed in the massive 70mm film format, Dunkirk is best experienced on the largest screen possible, which makes full use of the supersized celluloid. But since a majority of filmgoers, not to mention 100% of the home media release, will only see a 16:9 cut of the picture, there are many shots that felt unnaturally framed due to the extended headroom in the non-cropped version. It's one of those damned if you do, damned if you don't situations, but slightly distracting to see everyone's faces positioned in the dead center of the picture. But either way, all of it is stunningly detailed and hauntingly beautiful. Although to be fair, watching paint dry would probably look gorgeous too if it were projected from 4K IMAX laser projectors onto a 100-foot screen. The entirety of the air plot looks particularly astonishing, with cameras affixed to the inside and to the sides of Spitfire fighter planes as they swoop through the clouds above the English Channel. Easily the greatest aerial battles ever captured on film, these dogfighting scenes are worth the price of admission alone, and are even more impressive when you learn they were created without any computer effects. Prohibitive costs notwithstanding, if it could have been accomplished practically, it was, as Nolan chose to avoid CGI shots whenever possible. The results are seamless and realistic. Dunkirk explores several key scenes from different perspectives by inventively intercutting the narrative threads in a non-parallel way. As the technique arrives without any introduction or warning, it can be a bit confusing when you begin to see the same scene over from a different angle, but it does allow for additional insight. These are the types of creative decisions you don't usually associate with a summer blockbuster starring one of the hunky musicians from One Direction, but it works. Nolan may not be cinema's smartest filmmaker, but of the directors I'd consider smart, he's certainly the most accessible, and that counts for a lot. As I was hoping for a bit more historical insight and character development, I can't say this film is my favorite entry in Nolan's growing portfolio, but that doesn't preclude it from being one of the best war movies ever made. Dunkirk is a monumental achievement in blockbuster filmmaking and a truly amazing film. Finally, here's my review of Kingsman: The Golden Circle. A sequel almost on par with its predecessor. Matthew Vaughn returns to direct the follow-up to 2014's surprisingly successful Kingsman: The Secret Service. The experienced director utilizes every bit of his increased $104 million budget and the extended 141-minute runtime, packing this action comedy film with entertaining moments and characters. It fared slightly worse than its predecessor though, netting around $300 million a month after its September 2017 release. After the titular spy agency's headquarters is destroyed and the world's drug users are held hostage by an eccentric Julianne Moore, rookie agent Taron Egerton and his stalwart accomplice Mark Strong must join forces with their American counterparts to defeat her.
We're from the Kingsman Tailors shop in London. Maybe you've heard of us.
Oh, the Kingsman?
Yeah.
Huh. That's where y'all got them fine suits and them fancy spectacles y'all got on.
Exactly.
That's right.
Y'all look damn sharp. Let me see if I got it right here. You want me to believe that it's normal for a tailor to hack through an advanced biometric security system with nothing but a little bitty old watch on? I can promise you, that dog don't hunt. So why don't you go on and get down on your knees and tell me who you really work for?
Egerton once again shines as the resourceful lead. He's the handsome English gent ladies want to shag, and the charming gent men want to be. Through a particularly convoluted and overly explained series of flashbacks, Colin Firth's character returns as well, but his presence is at best distracting and at worst unnecessary, especially since it dramatically undercuts the emotional weight of the original picture. The utilization of the rest of the all-star cast, a group which shares an impressive 5 Oscar wins between them, is unfortunately also a bit hit or miss. Several big names like Channing Tatum and Jeff Bridges are utterly wasted. That being said, each individual performance is pretty stellar. One celebrity's inclusion goes well past cameo and becomes more amusing with each subsequent appearance. But it's the return of Hanna Ahlström as the sexy Swedish princess that was a surprise inclusion. Her role in Part 1 was nothing more than a throwaway joke to close the film on a lewd moment of hilarity, so there was absolutely no expectation she'd be woven back into this follow-up, let alone with such emotional effectiveness. Her relationship with Egerton feels authentic and earned, giving some much-needed balance to the absurd narrative. I was also pleasantly surprised and impressed that Sam Jackson returned to film a single new shot necessary to explain an expositional flashback. And Bruce Greenwood is perfectly devilish as the president, which I believe marks the 3rd time the Canadian actor has portrayed the American leader. In a word, The Golden Circle is totally dope. From the dark humor to the cheeky characters, it had me smiling throughout the extremely fast-paced R-rated narrative. But the real draw here is the inventively filmed action sequences, bursting with kinetic movement, fancy gadgets, and fantastic music. A sequence where Firth and Egerton fight back-to-back while yet another perfectly selected pop-rock song blares in the background was as entertaining as it was outlandish. Despite the particularly convenient return of Firth and a few scenes that share too much similarity to the first film, Kingsman: The Golden Circle is an excessive action romp with likable characters. I thought it was an awesome movie. That does it for this modest list of 2017 films I loved, but stay tuned in a couple episodes where I'll be reviewing some of the ones I hated. In the meantime, we'll be taking a look at classic monster films in my 5th horror episode if you'd like to leave a review for these films. Until then, please click or tap here to watch my reviews of action movies with Keanu Reeves, here to watch a playlist of every movie I've rated a 10, or click the jog wheel icon below to subscribe and be notified of all new uploads when they're released. Once again, my name is Jonathan Paula. Thanks for watching, and have a good movie night.